I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. It started when I had my second child at age 35. I had a trauma birth. It wasn't a good time for our family. I didn't have enough breast milk. I wasn't sleeping. I was extremely stressed. And I could tell there was something wrong. They ask about the baby and then they vaccinate the baby. They check on the baby. How's the baby? But hey, how's the mom? Is the mom okay? And I really wasn't okay.
So I am super excited to chat with Sandy Kruse. We are going to be talking about thyroid cancer, which is something that I have not spoken about on this podcast.
It was really downhill, like really bad. I had all the symptoms of hypothyroidism. You name it, hair loss, no energy, weight gain. I had edema, swelling. But the biggest thing that I'm going to say to anybody who experiences hypothyroidism is this extreme loss of vitality. It's like the essence of who you are as a person is gone. And everything in your body slows down. They suggested to remove the entire gland because they don't believe that you can do things to shrink nodules. And, maybe I would have done something different now with what I know now.
Let me go ahead and give Sandy's impressive bio here, short but sweet bio. So Sandy Kruse is a registered holistic nutritionist, a certified metabolic balance coach, and the podcast host of Sandy K Nutrition, Health, and Lifestyle Queen. Now at just under 1.4 million downloads, Sandy educates on how we can all age better through living a life of balance, body, mind, spirit, and soul. And welcome, Sandy K.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eric. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy you're here as well. This is going to be an exciting conversation, and just really can't wait to get into your backstory, which we're actually going to do now, because I really want you just to jump into your background a little bit more and, of course, lead into your thyroid cancer journey.
I think it's important to talk about it from where it began. I do believe that genetics or epigenetics always, has a part in everything as it relates to our health. But what can trigger these genes to actually express? And with me, it started when I had my second child at age 35. And see, the first baby was the easy one, and then the second one wasn't. I had a trauma birth. It was really, really stressful because I wasn't well. And here I was taking care of a newborn and a toddler. I had a spouse that traveled almost weekly and a baby that had colic and all of the things that a lot of new moms deal with. You go to see your general physician and they ask about the baby, and then they vaccinate the baby. They check on the baby. How's the baby? But hey, how's the mom? Is the mom okay? And I really wasn't okay. I had lost so much weight so quickly. And this is, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly when thyroid issues began for me, but I kind of have an idea that I had postpartum thyroiditis, which was never diagnosed because I had all the symptoms. It was very different from my first delivery and first pregnancy. I didn't have enough breast milk. I wasn't sleeping. I was extremely stressed. And I could tell there was something wrong, but I didn't know what was going on. And then fast forward quite a few years later, my baby was 5 and she was diagnosed with a soft tissue sarcoma. It is a malignant tumor. And all of that stress was just, I can't even explain what it's like to have a sick child, but it wasn't a good time for our family. And then almost exactly 1 year after that, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. So my daughter and I actually had it was her second surgery. and my first to remove my entire thyroid gland and 2 lymph nodes 1 year apart. It was like October 2010, October 2011. And then, the story begins with what happened afterwards. And it wasn't the simple, here, take 1 pill and you're going to be just great. And you're just going to be fine. And you don't need the gland. It definitely wasn't that.
And I assume it was a papillary thyroid cancer?
Yes, correct.
And so you had, you got the ultrasound, and then with the ultrasound pretty much showed that, that didn't confirm the cancer. When you got the biopsy after getting the ultrasound, and then that's when you found out you had cancer, thyroid cancer.
Yes, and it was an incidental finding. So what happened was I had a migraine with aura, and it was the first time in my life. And you're a doctor. Most people who have migraine, usually it starts at around puberty, and it's something that a lot of people deal with their entire life. Well, I had never had one. And I had a migraine with aura before I was diagnosed, before they did any kind of testing. And I thought I was having a stroke. So I was 41 years old. And I thought, oh my God, like, what is this? Because it was visual aura. I also had this weird thing. And when you go and you research symptoms, a lot of times they'll say, oh no, or a doctor will just say, no, there's no correlation. And I always had this like coughing or choking or gagging. I remember even stopping the car once. I had both my kids in the car. I had to stop the car because when it feels like you have saliva that goes down the wrong way and then you can't stop coughing. I had so many of those incidents. And so I had a family doctor that wasn't really big on testing, but he was actually on vacation, and it was a substitute doctor. She was a female doctor. She said, you know what? Like, it's just kind of weird that you're having your first migraine ever at 41. So let's just do some testing. And they did do the carotid artery ultrasound. And just to make sure there was no blockages or anything going on in the brain, they did the brain MRI. And then in the carotid artery ultrasound, they said, oh, interesting. It's all clear. Your carotid arteries look great, but we found 5 nodules in your thyroid, and they were bilateral. So that means on both sides. And only 1 of the nodules was actually cancerous. So, and the way they found that out, which was also kind of rare because people who have had fine needle biopsies know that they often come back inconclusive. And when they did the fine needle biopsy on me, they immediately said suspicious for papillary carcinoma. So in a way, I'm like, oh, well, that was kind of lucky because I know many people who have many of these biopsies that come back inconclusive, right? You probably know that.
Yes.
So it was a bit of it was actually pretty quick because by the time I think the first time, it was all within like 2 months that I had my thyroid removed. And then they suggested to remove the entire gland because, in Western medicine, they don't believe that you can do things to shrink nodules. And, maybe I would have done something different now with what I know now. But having known that only 1 of them was malignant, they suggested I remove the entire gland because the nodules were bilateral. So I had a lumpy thyroid.
Yeah. I mean, very rarely these days they recommend a partial thyroidectomy. And then now there's radiofrequency ablation. Not sure if you're familiar with that, where they could target specific thyroid nodules. And just, again, even with that, when that first came out, it wasn't really for malignant nodules. So, but now apparently for some cases of thyroid cancer, it might be able to, at least one of the conversations I had with Dr. Angela Maza on the podcast, I'm pretty sure she said it could actually help with some cases of papillary thyroid cancer. Again, back when you got it, I don't think that was an option.
Nope.
But now potentially in some cases. So they removed the entire thyroid gland. And so how was the recovery time? How did you feel after the after the surgery, after like a few days, as well as like a few weeks later?
After I had the thyroid gland, so first I should note, I was with one of the top endocrinologists and head and neck surgeon at Toronto's Mount Sinai Hospital. And I was there for 3 days. And now I think it's like, boom, bam, you're in, you're out. I was there from Wednesday to Friday. The recovery, it's just kind of crazy the way that they want to give you all of these pain meds. And I'm like, I got home, I was taking extra strength Tylenol, to be truthful. Like, I didn't think it was such a big deal. And then they gave me T3 to begin. So I actually felt pretty good after I had the thyroid removed. But then they made me go off everything to do the thyrogen injections. So then there was a nurse that came to my home to give me, I think it was 2 injections from what I recall. I don't know what the process is now, but it's to test to ensure that none of the gland, none of the tissue is left, that they removed everything. And then that was when the struggles began, because they put me on T4 only. They put me on Synthroid. And the only reason they put me on T3, which we all know is the active thyroid hormone, right after the surgery, is because it has such a short half-life. So it exits the body very quickly, so that when I was ready to do the thyrogen injections, I would have none of this hormone left in my body. Whereas T4 it can be like 4 to 6 weeks.
So a couple of things. Backtracking. One, you said you saw one of the top endocrinologists, which is important to mention, because if someone does need really any type of surgery, not just thyroid surgery, but focusing on the thyroid surgery, again, you probably want to go to someone who has done a lot of the surgeries. And I mean, I know everybody has to begin somewhere, but still, if I was having thyroid surgery, I would do my research and try to find an experienced surgeon. So I'm glad you mentioned that you didn't just like randomly choose anybody, or let your primary or someone else, and maybe your primary gave you some guidance, but sometimes they just they let the primary or the endocrinologist just make the decision for them. And then also I wanted to ask you, as far as making sure that there was no thyroid tissue left, did you receive any radioactive iodine in addition to? You did not, because sometimes they'll give
No,
radioactive iodine after the thyroid surgery to
I
remove.
didn't need it.
Okay.
Because I only had the one nodule,
Yeah.
and it was small enough that they said, you don't need to have it. Thank God.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you didn't have to get that. So, all right. So you started with T3, you felt okay, switched to Synthroid, and from there it was kind of downhill then?
It was really downhill, like really bad. I had all the symptoms of hypothyroidism. You name it: hair loss, no energy, weight gain. I had edema, swelling. I could go on, but the biggest thing that I'm going to say to anybody who experiences hypothyroidism is this extreme loss of vitality. It's like the essence of who you are as a person is gone, and everything in your body slows down. So I started to experience a lot of that because I was hypothyroid for a while, but I kept getting well, you're within the healthy range. But we all know that range can be pretty vast, and everybody's so individual that, even if I can't recall where I sat. I know that my TSH at one point, when they made me go off of everything, I stopped. The last time I had blood work, I was about a 32 TSH. So I had little kids. And so that was when I was like, I got to start researching what's going on in my body. And this is well before I went back to college for holistic nutrition, to understand, like, how is all this interconnected? I was told that I just need one pill. And then I learned about T4, T3. I learned about T1, T2, T3, T4, calcitonin, and that the thyroid produces so many more hormones than just, T3 and T4. And so, it all began with me getting the book Stop the Thyroid Madness. Have you heard it? Everybody's heard of that.
Yeah.
It's a patient advocacy book. That's where I began, and I'm like, oh my God, my stress might be affecting my ability to convert that T4 to the active T3 that I need. And then it was like this light bulb moment. I went back to this endocrinologist who's like this, well-known worldwide. I'm like, you need to give me T3. And then he's like, he was kind of shocked because nobody was talking about this and nobody knew about this. And probably 95% of his patients were on T4 only. And then things started to change when I was on a combination of both.
Did they even test for T3? Because you said that they mentioned that your levels were within the healthy range, which their healthy range isn't really the optimal range, as we both know. But many times I'll just do TSH. Sometimes I'll do a T4. But did they all along monitor the T3?
You know what? They did. And I actually checked on this today, Eric, on what blood work I have access to. I can only go back as 2016. But they did at Mount Sinai. They did a full panel, and they would regularly check thyroglobulin, which I know is important for people who have had thyroid cancer, because you want to have almost, undetectable thyroglobulin, because if you have thyroglobulin, that means that it could be back.
Yeah.
So yeah, they did check. But in Canada, I know this can be a problem in the US as well. TSH is like all they will check if you go see a general practitioner. But if you go to an endocrinologist with a thyroid problem, if they're a good endocrinologist, they're going to check TSH, free T3, free T4, thyroglobulin, other antibodies, depending on what your thyroid issue is.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, just when you said that he reluctantly gave you T3, but I assumed at that point they would have done a T3 test, but I didn't know if prior, but it sounds like that they did all along. And many times, again, that T3 will kind of be on the lower side, but within that lab range, and they'll still kind of ignore it, even though it seems obvious that there's a problem converting that T4 to T3. So you are on T4 and then you are on T3. So when you are on both the T4, T3, you felt a lot better.
I did, except I had crazy. I was looking at some of my levels from 2016, and for about 5 years, they suppressed my TSH. And I would be at undetectable levels of TSH. So 0. It would be 0. But then there were times that I had pretty severe symptoms of hyperthyroid because of that suppression. There were times that my free T3 levels were above 7. Now I'm telling you this, I don't know if the US labs are the same, but it was very, very high. So I had for a good 5 years, some anxiety and some other stuff going on. And, I always find this so funny when they say that people lose weight if they're hyperthyroid. I gained weight, Eric. I gained weight because I had so much of that nervous energy that I would just constantly be eating. And it didn't matter. I guess I was just like, anyway, I've had some struggles with weight since then, regardless of whether I'm hypo or hyper.
So you think you are in a hyper state for about 5 years?
About that. And my endocrinologist said it was really important during that time. And I don't know if they do that anymore. Because as you know, women who are in perimenopause, who are in a hyperthyroid state for too long, can have pretty severe bone loss, right?
That's what I was going to bring up, if you ever got a bone density scan, just because being on that dose for quite a while.
Yes. And I started to work out after they took me off the higher doses of thyroid meds. They just said that if I'm in a more suppressed TSH state, that there's less likelihood that the cancer would come back.
Mhm.
And so that's why they did it. I'm not sure if the guidelines, I think I read somewhere that they've changed that since for people who have had thyroid cancer because of the bone issue. And yes, I do get bone density tests pretty regularly and I'm still okay.
Okay.
So
Good, good, good.
yeah, it didn't do any damage.
All right. Well, great. So thanks. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I'm glad you got your bone densities. Sounds like you get them regularly, you said, so that's good. And then you've also, so I've listened to some of your other interviews in preparation for this podcast. And then obviously your background, also nutritionist. So I want to like talk a little bit about some of the recommendations as far as like protein, for example, intermittent fasting, some of your thoughts about that. But you also have an experience with proton pump inhibitors as well, being on the acid blockers.
So yeah, God, it's a very sore spot for me because I feel, and I've written about this, I feel like I was harmed by being put on those. So I started to have infections that wouldn't heal. And I started to have, like, I don't even know if I want to talk about it here, but they sent me to a gastroenterologist. This was shortly after I was on T4 only. Now, remember how I was saying everything in the body slows down when you're in a
Hmm.
hypothyroid state for a long time. So healing slows down. And you can have a lot of weird things go on in the body because your body's not able to heal. Everything is just downgraded. So I was sent to an endocrinologist. I never even had GERD or any kind of heartburn or anything. They put me on a proton pump inhibitor and said I had too much acid in my stomach without like any kind of tests or anything.
Yeah.
And I became addicted to this proton pump inhibitor. There's something called a rebound effect. I've been on it probably for about 10 years. God, I went through states where I was borderline anemic. I had ferritin levels as low as 6. And for those of your listeners who know what ferritin is, it's your iron stores. So the only way I tried to get off, I had such a severe rebound effect that I thought I was having a heart attack because then that was when I started to have severe GERD. But it was only after I was trying to get off of the proton pump inhibitor. So I did everything I could. I went off of it for a year. When I did, and they did the scope, they said I had Barrett's esophagus. And then they told me, you better get on that proton pump inhibitor again. Otherwise, you're now not only having had thyroid cancer at risk for esophageal cancer. So I went back on the proton pump inhibitor. And by the way, I had done everything as it related to diet, lifestyle, all of those things to get rid of the heartburn when I went off of the proton pump inhibitor. But none of it worked for me. Nothing. I tried weaning, I tried everything that was recommended, but nothing worked. And there are some genetics in there that I think might have a part of this because I have family members who have similar issues. When I went back to college, which I was 46, it was with the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition. I then started to wean off, but so slowly. So still today, I am on an over-the-counter dose of, 20 milligrams of Nexium.
Hmm.
But I was on very, very high prescription doses. So I consider that a win. And the way that I prevented becoming anemic all those years was by, I call it faking my own digestion. So I started taking digestive enzymes with betaine hydrochloric acid. Then I started to take additional betaine hydrochloric acid. And of course, we know there are contraindications. So this isn't advice for anybody because if you have an ulcer, you can really exacerbate your issues. But I didn't. I had very low stomach acid. So still to this day, I take high doses of HCl and I take a digestive enzyme with every protein meal. That's how I'm keeping my mineral balance. Because we all know without stomach acid, things can go downhill over the course of, gosh, I think I've been on proton pump inhibitors for about 10 years or more.
Yeah, that's a long time. And you said at one point your ferritin was a 6, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. And is it, I mean, I assume you monitor your iron levels, your ferritin levels. So more recently they're a lot better.
So when I was, doing the betaine and I was still menstruating, so this is really important for your female listeners. If you're still menstruating, that has a big effect on this ferritin. And I had other issues with estrogen dominance. I had so many things that were going on in my 40s, and I had no one who could really help me. And that's one of the reasons I did go back to college. So while I was still menstruating regularly, I would probably sit at about, around 15, 16. And that was, if I got up to 20, that was a real win for me. Now, I actually just did blood work. I'm sitting at a 39. So, but I'm now in menopause. So 1 year of no periods, technically textbook. No, now I'm in menopause finally at 55.
If you are looking to do everything you can to save your thyroid, in addition to watching my videos on YouTube, you also might want to subscribe to my free online newsletter, which is called Healthy Gut, Healthy Thyroid. Not only will you get the latest news on how to heal your gut and restore your thyroid health, but during each edition, I'll demonstrate a different blood or functional medicine test marker that relates to healing your gut and or your thyroid. There will also be an Ask Dr. Eric section where not only can you see questions that other people have asked related to gut and thyroid health, but you can also submit a question for me to answer in a future edition. To subscribe to the Healthy Gut, Healthy Thyroid newsletter, please visit savemythyroid.com/newsletter. Okay, so, and you've never been like vegan, vegetarian, even when your levels were low, you were always eating meat?
Well, yes, I was always eating meat, but this is all relating to the weight side of it, Eric, where I was like, what the heck? Like, I don't even know my body anymore. I'm a small person. I'm only 5'2". And I was like, what's happening? I can't eat this way. And I think for me, it was almost like this double whammy of perimenopause and no thyroid gland. Right. So it was like a double whammy for me. So there was a time that I thought, oh, maybe raw food is the answer. Maybe becoming more vegetarian. I was never vegetarian, never, but I kind of avoided more animal protein at one time. These are all little stints. I've done many diets. I've done low carb. I've done keto. I've done intermittent fasting. So I've done a lot of these things. And in the end, it's all about the balance.
Agree. Yeah. I mean, I definitely want to chat with you a little bit about intermittent fasting because that's a hot topic, these days and over the last few years. And again, I don't have anything against intermittent fasting, but sometimes it could get extreme. People do, I mean, even sometimes 16/8 fasts are too much for some people, let alone like 18-hour fast. And we'll talk about regular, like daily people who are doing it on a daily basis. Oh, I'm just going to go 20 hours and have a 4-hour eating window or a 6-hour eating window. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on intermittent fasting.
The biggest thing that I'm going to say is that I became insulin resistant while I was intermittent fasting. How is that possible, right? People say, how? I was 52. This was the first year that I went from regular cycles to I only had 4 periods that year. That was the year that estrogen dropped, that I started to experience hot flashes. I was still intermittent fasting, listening to the Maniverse. Sorry, no offense, Eric. I call them the Maniverse.
No offense taken.
But, I'm like, oh, well, and I was treating my body almost in a robotic way as opposed to listening to my body. And if you go back to my history, I have some issues with cortisol. I've got some issues going on. So, and maybe my resiliency to the stress it was causing me is not as strong as your resiliency. So, we're also bio-individual and we just need to listen to what makes sense for us. So, I think intermittent fasting is fine for some and not fine for others. And now the only thing I will do is do 12 hours overnight. I don't eat late at night. I don't snack. I don't, I have, as you know, I became a certified metabolic balance coach. And the reason I did that was number one, they said, hey, do the program. You're recording with us. You got to learn. I'm like, okay, all right. And so I did. And I learned so much about what was going on with my insulin sensitivity right in the latter stages of perimenopause. And then I learned, okay, this isn't suiting my body. And then, of course, I started to research my own genetics and predispositions for type 2 diabetes. And I have quite a few. And then I don't have a thyroid gland to boot. So I really got to look at all the variables, and I hope people don't get confused by this, but when you really tap into what makes sense for your body, you can thrive no matter what, without a thyroid, with a thyroid that's maybe not working so great, but you can.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I love what you say about listening to your body. Just, I mean, I'm sure there are people who are doing intermittent fasting and are thriving, but then there's also those who don't feel good and maybe they should eat again 7 o'clock in the morning, do like that 12-hour fast, stop eating at whatever 6, 7 o'clock. We're not saying to eat 10 o'clock at night, so still 2, 3 hours after going to bed. I would recommend not to eat, but yeah, if you're hungry first thing in the morning or an hour after eating, I agree with you. And the no snacking, even that, I would say, again, it's different. Like, I'm more with you. Like, again, I think a lot of people snack just for the sake of snacking. But if someone is obviously dealing with hypoglycemia, or if someone absolutely is hungry and they really, and that's a sign maybe they're not getting enough protein if you really feel like you need a snack. So that's like a different, or I shouldn't say different conversation because it is kind of tied into this, but there could be a reason why some people feel like they need a snack in between meals. But
Sure.
yeah, I think we're on the same page.
Yeah. And then the whole protein conversation, I used to be, because I'm like, okay, this was when I was 47 or 48. I'm like, okay, I'm getting close to menopause. I better start working out. So I started working out. I would lift pretty heavy at times. And then I was very much into taking in a lot of protein. So that's the other thing. You hear a lot of these doctors saying you must have this much protein in every single meal or this much per day or whatever. I'm like, God, how can you say that? How can you say that when you have no idea what Sandy Kruse is doing? Like, how can you say I need this much protein? And then we know if you look at, and that's why I'm always about the balance. Yes, we need protein, but we need protein to suit our body and our needs and our lifestyle. And I do think too much protein is not great for longevity.
And like you said, it depends on the person too. So like, if someone is, hopefully everybody's listening to this is on the more active side and exercising and doing those who can do resistance training. Some people might be healing and not be ready for that yet. But again, there's a time and place for more protein. But I agree. I think there are definitely people that are not getting enough protein. But on the other side of the spectrum, there are people who are overloading and struggling to get in as much protein. Because when some of the experts out there are talking about, you need to get. I know there's different, obviously, units of measurements, but here it's like they talk about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So if someone weighs, 120 pounds, which isn't really heavy, they would need to eat like 120 grams of protein per day.
Right.
If someone's 180, like a guy, that's their ideal weight, they would need to get 180 grams of protein, which which is a lot of protein and not easy to do also.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways that you can do that. I remember when I was working out more heavy, I would do amino acids. I would be taking in amino acids. So not protein powder, because we know protein powder, a lot of it has a lot of garbage. It's hard to find a really clean protein source. But you know what I am starting is collagen.
Okay.
I am starting to do that, take that every day, because a big thing that happens to a lot of women when your estrogen starts to decline is you start to get a lot of these aches and pains and a lot of joint problems. You know this. You're a doctor. You know this. And so menopause can really trigger a lot of these not so great things that go on with the joints in your body. So I am doing a collagen powder, but a very full spectrum collagen.
Okay. Like a whole body collagen
The
powder?
one, the one that I'm doing is actually Dr. Josh Axe's Ancient Nutrition. Have you heard of that
Okay.
one? I like it.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the ingredients, but I know he has his like bone broth powder and his own. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
It's clean. It's clean. And he uses like a marine collagen. He uses a bovine, very clean. So and he doesn't use erythritol. I'm not a fan of erythritol as a non-caloric sugar replacement. No thanks.
What do you like do you like any sugar substitutes like stevia or monk fruit?
You know what? God, I think I've been damaged, honestly, because I used to be so robotic in everything I did, to be truthful, and it never served me. So when I was keto, I would only take in, what is it, Swerve? Do you have that in the US? Swerve?
Doesn't ring a bell. Swerve.
It's a mix of erythritol with other non-caloric sweeteners. And then I would take in erythritol. I don't mind stevia. I don't like monk fruit. I feel like a lot of these non-caloric sweeteners are more processed than just going and having, I prefer to use like a raw organic coconut sugar. It's better for your glycemic index, less processing than like a erythritol. I know a lot of people like monk fruit, but my gut can't take it. And I think that that's the key where, again, you kind of have to look at sugar alcohols, like just kill you as it relates to the gut and it depends. I remember I was baking because I'm like, oh, I can't eat sugar. So then I'd be baking almost every day. I'm like, what am I going to bake today with erythritol? And so it wasn't good for me.
Yeah.
So now I've used date sugar. I've used coconut sugar. I'll use raw unpasteurized honey, or I'll use pure organic maple syrup. Those are the things I will stick to. And then if you need a granulated sugar, a raw turbinado sugar, something like that, that's it. I'm not going to use all of the non-caloric stuff. It just doesn't make me feel good. Not that I eat a lot of sugar anyway.
Okay. No, makes sense. Yeah, I agree with especially like the honey, like pure honey, pure maple syrup in moderation for not everybody, but for many people, good option. Yeah, I mean, like when I have green tea, herbal teas, I was guilty years ago of adding stevia to it, but now I just have them plain. Honestly, I don't add anything to it. I don't add even honey or maple syrup to it. I just have it like it is.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
I mean, if I've got some sort of a flu or something going on, then I'll have honey, a teaspoon of honey. I'm like, who cares? Sure, it's going to raise my blood sugar, but I'm not going to worry about it because my body needs it.
Well, there you go. Well, hopefully you don't have to do that too often.
No, not too often.
Yeah. All right. And then before we wrap it up, and again, if there's anything else you want to cover, we could, but I did want to ask you about spore-based probiotics, Akkermansia, just because I heard a conversation you had. And I'm more of a lactobacillus bifidobacteria person as well. So I'm still, I don't want to say skeptical with spore-based probiotics, but as far as the research, is definitely more research still with the lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. So like when someone is taking like exclusively a spore-based probiotic, to me, it's like, again, it's just because they heard, I guess, another practitioner, but also some of the companies hype them up, which I understand. That's what they're trying to, I mean, if they sell them, I get it. It's a business, but yeah, so I'd like to get your thoughts about spore-based probiotics as well as Akkermansia, because there's now supplements available for, I think it's just one company that offers Akkermansia supplements right now.
Pendulum.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
So here's the interesting thing about spore-based. So I'm born in Canada, but my parents are Croatian. They lived on the farms in really, like, my dad's going to be 88. So we're talking old school. And my mom, she's going to be 79. So I love to listen to their stories, how they grew up on the farm, what they did, how they lived, how they grew their crops, how they reared their animals, all that kind of stuff. Because I find it fascinating. It's kind of like looking at the blue zones and then coming up with a modern way to live. So if you look at how farmers lived, sure, they would get spore and soil-based probiotics. Usually it would be entered through the air when they're doing their farming, and maybe there would be some residue left on their produce, but they're not ingesting giant amounts of spore and soil-based probiotics normally. So the way that I look at it, I'm like, in my little brain, Eric, it doesn't make logical sense to me. I don't care about, the company that's doing all these big advertisements. I truly don't care. I look at what is logical to me, and maybe getting a little bit is okay. But what do we have in our gut? What is it, like a trillion different bacteria in our gut? So I'm like, give me some of the human strain that I may be lacking because of the environment that I live in and maybe the food quality that I have access to. So give me some of the human. And we all know. And so the other thing is proliferation. So, from what I've researched on spore-based, they really can proliferate in the gut, right?
Can they? Because I know the lactobacillus and bifido, they don't, like, you got to keep on taking them.
Right. But spore-based, I believe the research, and you can check on this because I'm not definitively saying, pretty sure they can proliferate. So
Okay.
do I want that? Let's look that up to confirm, Eric, because I'm not 100%
I'll have to do some
sure.
research, yeah.
Because we all know the lacto, bifido, those are transient. I've done some research on L-reuteri though, and apparently there's more to come on L-reuteri. I don't know if you've ever made your own yogurt. I tried. It was a fail. I'm going to try again. But some strains can proliferate, but a lot of these human strains that we're taking from the bottle, they don't. They're transient.
Mm-hmm.
As for Akkermansia, I took it for a short period of time. And the thing that, it's all in this marketing stuff. I have no loyalty to any of these supplement companies that we're talking about. I took Akkermansia according to whatever I researched. I think it was 2 months. It was a 2-month protocol that I did. And, some of the advertising that's out there saying it acts like a GLP-1 and can help with your weight. I saw nothing. Nothing. Zero. Maybe there's other factors in there. We don't know for sure, but I saw nothing. And the research that I did on Akkermansia is that you don't want too much of it. Like, it can actually do the opposite for your intestinal barrier that you want. So this is why I'm always like, too much of anything, I'm just like, I'm like off of it. So I did do a protocol, but have you heard of, I think it's called Vitrac? It's a gut test.
I don't think so.
I think they test for Akkermansia. I'm sure the GI map does too.
It does, yeah. GI map does look at that.
Yeah. So I do know that they often will recommend, like, test your gut for Akkermansia first. Yeah. Because too much isn't good. So it's like, okay, well, what can I do? Well, how about I eat fermented foods? How about, my parents still, you would laugh, they still ferment their own cabbage, like very old school in like a big barrel. They do it every winter. And so I just tell my mom, make me some cabbage rolls, please. Like it's the best. So eat it, preferably eat it. Eat prebiotics, eat postbiotics, eat probiotics. And the way you do that is to eat a variety of foods and then supplement with a human strain. That's very simple, but that's how I do it.
Oh, there you go. Oh, I love it. Very helpful. And yeah, we covered a lot of different topics here. I want to make sure that, I mean, is there anything else that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you? Anything else that you want to say before we wrap it up and tell people how to find out more about you?
Well, I don't know if you have a lot of female listeners, but it'd be useful to
Definitely
have.
do. Yeah.
You do?
Oh, yeah.
We might have to do a whole other episode on menopause when you have thyroid issues, because I've done a ton of research, but this is going to be too long for me to get into. We're talking about how estrogen affects the thyroid, I just came off a very hyperthyroid state, which I haven't been in so long, just because I took 7 keto DHEA. And it was recommended to me for cortisol regulation. Yeah. So there's a lot there, Eric. I mean, but I think this was a good place to start. And I think that people have to know that there is a way to come back. And I think when you get in touch with your own body and go, I don't feel right, you have to learn how to advocate for yourself. I'm on 4 different thyroid meds. Well, 3 different thyroid meds, 4 different doses. And I work with my endocrinologist just to make sure that my balance is optimized.
Yeah, makes sense. I didn't ask you, or maybe you brought it up, but have you taken desiccated, or
I am on it. Yeah.
Okay, because she said you have 4 different. So you're taking T4, T3, and along with that, are you rotating that with desiccated, or?
So I'm on 2 different doses of T4 and it changes. And recently it changed again just because of the whole DHEA debacle. But we won't get into that here. But yes, I take 2 different Synthroid. I take Cytomel and I take a desiccated every day.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's working for you. So, which is great. You're feeling better. I'm sure your numbers are looking a lot better. And yeah, we'll definitely have to get you back on the show, talk about menopause and share your story as well. So would love to have another conversation with you, Sandy. And yeah, thank you so much for being on. And if you could let others know where they can find you. You have your own podcasts and also a Substack, which I'll include on the link. I'll include the links in the show notes, but if you could talk a little bit about your podcast as well as your Substack.
For my podcast, just go to sandykruse.ca, SANDYKRUSE.ca. There you'll find all the links to my podcast, where you can find it, where you can listen. My podcast is now over 5 years, and really it's all about wellness as we age. And it's all really body, mind, spirit, soul, because I'm a big believer that we are not robots and we all need to understand our bodies better in order to age better. And the goal is really, how can we optimize that and try and, not get one of these nasty diseases that a lot of people are getting in their midlife years, right? So that's my podcast. Substack, I am a writer as well. I released my Essential Thyroid Guide last year. That was self-published on Amazon. It's called the Essential Thyroid Guide. It is 100% not a clinical guide. It is a patient advocacy guide. And it's really just simplified so that you can understand all the factors that can affect your thyroid health. And then I also have Substack, where I write a lot of short explorative essays where you can really just kind of think about things as they relate to your own health, so you don't make mistakes. I've made a lot of them by listening to all of these health gurus out there, and you really need to really decipher resonance for yourself.
Yeah, I agree. I told you before we started, I signed up for your Substack and yeah, listen to your podcast. I also was interviewed by you. And yeah, just highly recommend the podcast, the Substack, and definitely check out her Essential Thyroid Guide book on Amazon. Again, we'll include all the links in the show notes. And again, thank you so much, Sandy. This was a great conversation and really appreciate you sharing your journey, your experience with thyroid cancer.
Thank you so much, Eric. I really, really appreciate meeting you and having me here today.
Yeah, same here. The feeling definitely is mutual.
Thanks.